Dispatch, we've got a report on Officer Reagan. Last seen exiting evidence locker for B at 2213. He signed out a stack of seized bills marked for transfer. No escort. No visual since then. Only thing left at the scene was his badge.
The badge wasn't found by a fellow officer, nor by forensics. It was a kid 10 years old walking home from school with a bag of chips in one hand and his backpack half-zipped. He saw something shiny wedged between the trash bins behind. A gas station. At first, he thought it was a toy, maybe part of a costume. But when he picked it up, his fingers curled around something cold, metallic, and too heavy to be fake. The numbers were real. The nameplate was intact. It belonged to Officer Travis Rourke, a decorated cop who had vanished 3 nights earlier. During a standard evidence transfer, his disappearance had already raised questions. No signs of struggle, no body. Just an empty patrol car abandoned at the city's edge. But now, miles from where he'd last been seen, his badge was here untouched, undamaged, and completely out of place. When the boy's mother saw it, she froze. She used to work at City Records. She knew what a badge like that meant. She dialed 911 with a trembling voice and told the dispatcher, "I think you need to come quick. My son just found something, and someone needs to explain how." Detective Elise Navarro was the first to arrive. She'd barely slept since Rourke disappeared. They had served on the same beat for 2 years. The case had already turned strange. Before this discovery, Rourke had been transporting confiscated cash $73.00 from a gang sweep when his GPS went dark. His radio died minutes later. No distress signal, no backup call. It was as if he'd driven into a black hole. When Elise reached the gas station, the badge was already in an evidence bag, handled only by the kid's mother and the responding patrol unit. She stared at the number, 291 for B. It wasn't just a badge, it was a statement. A badge wasn't something an officer left behind unless they were done, or someone else was done with them. The badge looked like it had just come out of the academy box, shiny, unmarred, and it clean. Elise glanced around. The alley had no cameras, no witnesses, and no reason for a badge to end up there unless someone placed it. Deliberately, carefully. She didn't say it aloud, but the thought screamed in her mind. This wasn't evidence. This was bait. And if someone wanted it to be found, they were watching. Back at the precinct, the badge became the epicenter of a storm. Officers whispered theories, and half the squad room suddenly had excuses not to work the case. Rourke wasn't just a missing cop, he was a respected one. Clean record, medals, commendations, and now he was either on the run, or worse, being used as a ghost to cover something up. Elise ran his last known coordinates again. Still nothing. She reviewed the body cam footage from the arrest connected to the cash routine, until the audio glitched near the end. A static burst, then silence. In that final frame, Rourke looked off camera, narrowed his eyes, and mouthed something. No sound, no context, just his lips forming a single word, "You." It was enough to make Elise push back her chair and swear under her breath. Someone had gotten to him. Whether Rourke left that badge himself or someone planted it to make it look that way. One thing was certain: the game had changed. The rules were no longer theirs. Elise closed the folder slowly, her fingertips trembling over the printout of the badge. The number glinted under the light. 291 for B. Still intact, still gleaming. But everything it stood for was starting to rot from the inside. Elise knew where she had to go next. Not the station, not the records room, but Rourke's apartment. She had been there before once, during a partner gathering, when his laugh still echoed off the balcony, and his fridge was full of takeout cartons and cheap beer. But now, standing outside his door with a warrant in one hand and a sick feeling in her gut, it didn't feel like the same place. Inside, it was perfect to perfect. No dirty laundry, no signs of sudden departure. The toothbrush still stood in the glass, the bed made, his boots by the door. But it wasn't staged either. This was someone who left quietly, expecting to return. She opened his desk drawer and found something odd. A sealed envelope addressed to E. Navarro. Her name in his handwriting. Hands shaking, she opened it. Inside was a single sentence: "If this gets to you, don't trust the ones asking." Questions, no signature, no explanation, just that. Elise sat down hard on his couch, the words repeating in her mind. Who exactly was asking questions? And what had Rourke uncovered that made him write that before he vanished without a trace? The next lead wasn't far. Rourke's dashcam had uploaded fragments to the cloud, just 3 clips, each under 10 seconds. The first showed him driving in silence, eyes locked on the rearview mirror. The second, a sudden swerve and him reaching for something under his seat. The third was black, no sound, no movement. Just 6 seconds of darkness and a faint clicking sound, like a chain dragging across pavement. Elise enhanced the audio. The tech on duty played it again. "That's not a chain," he muttered. "That's a badge, being dragged." It didn't make sense. Nothing about this did. Elise leaned closer to the monitor. In the final milliseconds of the third clip, a faint silhouette appeared, only shoulders and head, unmoving. Not Rourke, someone else, someone watching. She paused the frame, zoomed. It was blurry, but the figure had something on their chest, a shape, a shine, another badge. Elise printed the still and clipped it next to Rourke's photo on her board. She stared at the two, side by side. 2 badges, 2 men, but only one had vanished, unless the second was never supposed to exist in the first place. That night, Elise didn't go home. She stayed in the precinct's evidence room long after the others had left, alone with files, cameras, and the growing ache behind her eyes. She pulled up Rourke's old arrest logs, digging into his most recent cases. One name came up 3 times in the same week: Nico Barrow, mid-level enforcer, known for slipping through charges thanks to missing footage or silenced witnesses. The last time Rourke encountered him, the arrest report was empty, filed, time-stamped, but with no description, no officer notes, as if the incident never happened. Elise called internal affairs. No one would speak directly, but one message came through: "Drop it. For your own good." She laughed dry, bitter. Classic scare tactic. But it worked on some. Maybe it worked on Rourke. Maybe it didn't, but she couldn't let it work on her. She returned to the badge, still sealed in its case. She flipped it over. There, etched into the back, barely visible under the right light, was a number that didn't match his officer ID, Unit O for X. Elise checked the database. Nothing. No such unit existed. Not in the city. Not in the state. Now she had 2 impossibilities: a missing cop and a non-existent unit. And in the middle of it all, a badge that refused to be silent. Elise returned to her desk the next morning and found an envelope that hadn't been there the night before. No name, no markings, just her. Inside, a single photograph, grainy, low resolution, like it had been pulled from a decades-old security feed. It showed Rourke standing in front of a diner, talking to someone with their back to the camera. The timestamp was from 3 nights ago. The diner was across town, far from his last known location, far from anywhere he was assigned to be. She stared at the figure speaking to him, male, tall, wearing a coat too thick for the weather, and in his hand, just barely visible under the street lamp's flicker, was a small metallic shape. Elise zoomed in. It was a badge, but not Rourke's. It had a round edge, unlike their standard issue. An older design, federal, private. The more she looked, the more wrong it felt. She called the diner. The night manager confirmed the footage was real, but said the camera feed was deleted by someone from downtown. No one ever said who. Elise now had a trail that no one wanted her to follow. She pinned the photo to the board. Beneath Rourke's warning, beneath the frame of the unidentified man, a silent pattern was forming, and in every thread of it, someone had gone quiet. A badge, a unit that didn't exist, and now footage that shouldn't exist either, sent directly to her. Like a dare, she didn't know who was pulling the strings yet, but she knew this: Rourke was still out there, and he wasn't alone. Whatever this was, it went deeper than a disappearance. It smelled of something institutional, built, hidden. She wasn't just chasing a missing cop anymore. She was stepping into something that had already decided she wouldn't make it back. Elise checked the precinct system for any record of that badge number. Nothing. Not in active duty, not in archives, not in disciplinary logs. It was like the badge had never been issued. She tried cross-referencing old precincts, disbanded task forces, even off-the-books internal investigations. Still nothing, but something else emerged. An incident, 10 years ago, same badge shape, same diner. A former detective named Calvin Hensley retired early. After a nervous breakdown, filed a sealed complaint about surveillance interference and a cover-up, linked to a homicide. Elise had to use an old passcode from her academy mentor just to access it. The complaint was barely legible. Half the file had been redacted by non-local clearance. But one sentence wasn't. They're not cops, they wear the badge, but they don't answer to anyone. Elise stared at the words. Her pulse quickened. She had thought Rourke was a fluke, a desperate man with a messy conscience. But now, maybe he was a warning. Maybe that's why he left the badge instead of a note. Maybe it was a message, don't trust the uniform. Elise printed the complaint and slipped it into a locked drawer. She didn't trust her inbox, or her phone, or even the room she was in. Too many eyes, too many ghosts in the machine. She called Hensley, no answer. She drove to his last known address, abandoned. There was only a single faded sticker on the rusted mailbox for O for X. Just like the new case file number, her fingers trembled. She hadn't mentioned that number to anyone. It hadn't even been officially assigned yet. Elise stood on the porch, hearing nothing but her own breath and the wind tapping dry branches against the gutter. And in that stillness, for the first time, she felt it, something watching her. Not human, not distant, just watching. That night, Elise didn't go home. She couldn't. Not when the shadows outside her car window felt thicker than they should have been. Instead, she parked beneath an old overpass on the city's edge, where the streetlights flickered like they couldn't make up their minds. She pulled her jacket tight, stared at the sealed complaint on the passenger seat, and replayed the diner footage on her tablet again and again. Frame by frame, second by second, Rourke sat alone at the counter. No one entered, no one exited. But at timestamp 2 hours 17 minutes and 43 seconds, the footage glitched. A half-second distortion barely perceptible. And when the feed resumed, Rourke was gone. Just gone. No movement, no blur, no trace. Elise froze the frame, enhanced it. There was a figure faint, hazy reflected in the chrome napkin dispenser. A figure that hadn't been there before. A man, no badge, no face, just a silhouette. And something else. There was another badge resting on the counter now, identical to the one she found. Elise felt her stomach knot. Someone or something was leaving badges behind like breadcrumbs, but leading where? The precinct, the past, or something deeper beneath the surface of all they thought they knew. She looked up at the overpass wall. Someone had spray-painted a symbol, a black triangle with an eye in the center, and the number 400 scrawled underneath. She hadn't noticed it when she parked. Had it been there before? She wasn't sure anymore. The air around her felt different now, charged, like right before a lightning strike. Her fingers hovered over her phone, but she didn't call anyone. Not her captain, not internal, not even dispatch. She just whispered to herself, barely audible, "What the hell is for O for X?" And in response, something unseen tapped once, from the inside of her trunk. Elise jumped, heart slamming against her ribs like a fist against a locked door. The sound was too deliberate to be a coincidence. She reached for her sidearm, but her hand trembled. Slowly, she stepped out of the car and circled around to the trunk, flashlight beam shaking as it cut through the darkness. The night had gone silent, and naturally so. No traffic, no wind. Even the distant hum of the city had gone mute, as if the world was holding its breath. Elise stood before the trunk, staring at it like it might grow teeth. She counted to 3, bracing herself, and opened it. Nothing, just the usual spare tire, a toolkit, and her old duffel bag. But something was off. Her duffel was unzipped. Inside, tucked between spare clothes and a worn photo of her police academy graduation, was another badge, identical, same number, same scuffed edge. Elise gasped, stepping back. She hadn't put it there. She knew she hadn't. And then, her radio crackled to life, static, then a voice, faint, male, familiar, Unit 45, requesting backup, coordinates unknown. "He's still here." It was Rourke's voice, clear, Desperate. I didn't take it. I didn't take the money. He made me disappear. Elise dropped the radio like it had burned her. The voice wasn't a recording. It was live. But Rourke was supposed to be gone, dead, or something worse. She stared at the badge in her trunk, realizing now it wasn't just a calling card. It was a key, a warning, a message from someone trapped between places, between truth and something else. Her breath turned, cold, fogging in front of her. Behind her, the streetlight flickered and a second shadow appeared beside hers on the asphalt. Elise turned around in one violent motion, flashlight and weapon raised. Breath caught in her throat, but there was no one there, only the street, soaked in the same eerie stillness, the same suffocating silence that now felt almost alive. The second shadow had vanished, or maybe it had never been there. Her brain swam with doubt, fatigue, paranoia, or something she had never been trained to understand. She picked up the radio, her fingers numb, and pressed the button. Dispatch. This is Detective Elise Grant. I just received a transmission on an inactive channel. It sounded like Detective Rourke. Repeat. It sounded like Rourke. Silence answered her, then static, then nothing. Not even the usual tone acknowledging a received message. She stood there, waiting, alone in a pocket of time that didn't seem to move forward. Finally, she turned back toward her cruiser, badge still in hand, heart refusing to calm. She slid into the driver's seat, shut the door, and locked it. She stared at the dashboard, the clock blinking to 17 a.m., the exact time of Rourke's last transmission, months ago. The one they all said was corrupted. But this one wasn't corrupted. It was clearer than any tape in the evidence locker. Elise opened her laptop and typed in Rourke's badge number again. This time, the screen blinked once, a window popped open. File recovered. Accessing case 117B. But there was no internet, no connection, nothing that could explain how the file had opened. Her hands hovered over the keyboard as the screen loaded, slowly showing still frames from what looked like surveillance footage, a basement, a hallway, then a face, Rourke's, pale, eyes wide, like he had seen something behind the camera. Behind us, and his lips, frozen mid-sentence, mouthing the word, run. Elise couldn't move. The image on the screen held her like a hand gripping her throat. Rourke's eyes wide, terrified, pleading, seemed to look past the lens and directly at her, as if he knew this moment would come, as if he'd recorded this not for evidence, but as a warning. The video continued, frame by frame, flickering. Like old film, Rourke moved deeper into what appeared to be a concrete corridor, lit only by a single swinging bulb overhead. No sound, no timestamp, just the grainy footage and a sense that something was terribly wrong. Behind him, shadows twisted unnaturally, stretching and snapping back like rubber. Elise leaned in closer, trying to make out details, any clue, any landmark. Then the footage glitched violently. For a split second, there was a frame of something. Impossible, a figure, not human. Long limbs, no face, almost like it was watching from behind the frame. And then static. The screen went black. Elise jerked back, her heart hammering. She tapped the keyboard. Nothing. The laptop was off, dead, no power, no explanation. She looked up and froze. In the windshield, reflected faintly in the glass, stood a figure, still, unmoving. Where the badge had once rested on the dashboard, there was now only dust. The radio crackled again. A voice barely audible whispered through, "You're not supposed to see this." Elise shot out of the car, spinning around. Empty street. No one there. But something had changed. The air was thicker, the silence heavier. She turned back toward the vehicle. But the lights had shut off. Everything inside was dark. And on the screen, impossibly lit from within, Rourke's face reappeared. Only this time, he wasn't mouthing, "Run." He was mouthing her name, Elise, slowly, repeatedly, over and over again. The next morning, Elise submitted her report. A sanitized version. No mention of the footage. No mention of the figure. No mention of her own name whispered through the dead laptop. She wrote what they needed to read: standard procedure, incomplete documentation. Missing officer likely fled. It was easier that way, safer. But her hands trembled as she signed her name. There was a pressure on her chest now, not physical but constant, like the weight of being watched, and it didn't lift when she turned in the keys or handed over the badge she found. The precinct was quiet, too quiet. Officers avoided her eyes. Someone whispered about case 714. Another murmured, "He's not the first." Elise caught pieces rumors of others, past officers who vanished without a trace, always tied to mysterious cases that never quite made the records. When she asked, they shrugged, or lied, or disappeared into paperwork. The silence was louder than any scream. That afternoon, she went back to her apartment, shut all the blinds, locked every door twice, and yet, she couldn't bring herself to delete the footage. It was corrupted, but she kept the drive anyway, like an itch you can't scratch, or a wound you won't let close. Just knowing it existed made her feel less insane. She played the video again. Same flicker, same glitch, same frame of something. Inhuman. She paused it right before Rourke's face changed, zoomed in, and there, etched faintly in the concrete behind him, were numbers. For O4X, it wasn't just a random file. It was the case ID, and suddenly, everything clicked. Elise remembered the boxes of unsolved cases in storage, each one labeled with strange codes, initials, or numbers. She opened her laptop, heart racing, typed it in, and dozens of similar files appeared. All officers, all missing, all from case for O4X. Each file she opened was like peeling back a layer of rot hidden beneath polished tile. Reports written in shaky hands, resignation letters that read more like confessions, surveillance logs with hours missing, testimonies that contradicted reality, officers claiming to see things that weren't there, or hearing voices through static, calling them by names only their childhood journals knew. Elise sat frozen in front of the screen, scrolling through names she didn't recognize but somehow felt she should. Faces blurred beyond recognition, notes with strange diagram symbols, coordinates, and cryptic references to something called the threshold. One file referenced a precinct that no longer existed. Another detailed a conversation with a suspect who was never booked, never named, but apparently knew things about the officers' families, childhoods, and fears. Elise's breath caught when she opened a report dated 2 years ago. It was Rourke's. Handwriting, sloppy, fast, scared. He described a case that had begun exactly the same way. A missing person, a corrupted tape, a voice calling from nowhere. His last line read, "If you're reading this, stop looking. I thought I was strong. Enough, I was wrong." The timestamp showed it was never submitted. It was still sitting in the draft folder. She leaned back in her chair, her thoughts unraveling like thread pulled too tight. Every new window she opened led to another unanswered question, another officer who had stared into the same darkness she was now facing. They all thought they could handle it, and now, their names were just digital echoes, forgotten even by the department they died trying to serve. Elise understood now. Case for O4X wasn't a case. It was a trap, a system that fed on those who refused to look away. And now, it had her name, too. As the screen dimmed and the station's silence grew heavy around her, Elise felt a shift, not in the room, but inside herself. It was as if the air had thickened, pressing down on her shoulders, urging her to do what everyone else had done, walk away. Let the file stay closed. Let the mystery rot in peace. But she couldn't. Not after everything she'd seen. Not after learning that truth had a price, and its currency was often sanity. Her finger hovered above the power button of the monitor, trembling slightly. A part of her wanted to turn it off and erase the night from memory, but a deeper part, the one that had driven her to become a detective in the first place, refused. Elise printed Rourke's last report, slipped it into her coat pocket, and stood. Her reflection in the dark window looked older now, like she had lived through more than just one long shift. And maybe she had. Outside, the rain had started again, tapping against the glass like quiet warnings. As she reached for the door, her phone buzzed. A message, no name, no number, just one line. You opened it. Now it's watching you. She stared at the screen, her pulse slowing, her breath catching. The hallway lights flickered as she stepped into the corridor. Behind her, the file auto-closed on the monitor. Case for 104X vanished from the screen, as if it had never existed. But it existed in her now, in her blood, her silence, her shadow. She didn't know what the next step would be or if there even was one. But she knew this. She wasn't walking away. Because the case hadn't ended. It had only just begun. And somewhere in the dark, something was waiting for her to take another step.